Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, where you get concrete tools for mindset work, my best tips for lowering your anxiety. And you also hear funny and encouraging stories from me and others who have stories to share. Around here, you'll discover the easy way to stop overthinking, to get rid of self doubt, and finally embrace a calmer, more confident you. I am Olga, your host, a former therapist, a life coach, wife, blissfully an IVF mother, and a coffee lover. I'm excited that you tune in today, and I'm honored to be on the journey with you. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I am so happy that I found somebody to come to the podcast to talk all things money. Ladies, money is a conversation we absolutely have to have. I am tired of listening to women I coach say, money is not my thing. Money is not important. Money doesn't buy happiness. I don't look at my numbers. I don't understand numbers, and then just running away from numbers. Yet comparing their finances to somebody else, what they own to somebody else, and just feeling accurate about the subject of money. I was like that. To be completely honest, that was me. I went to school to study social work, and somehow I got in my head that you are either a business person or a helper. And I couldn't ever grab it in my head that you could be both, that you could be a helping business woman until I tried it, until I did it. And thankfully for me, I married into a family of entrepreneurs. My husband, you guys have heard me say this before, he has never been employed as an adult. I think he had a pizza, kitchen job when he was in high school because he must have had to do some hours somewhere somehow. He does not have the personality to be employed. It's a great thing that he's got it in him to be able to be self-employed. And his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather, they're all entrepreneurs. They've never worked for anyone. And I was luckily influenced by that. And my parents are scholars, so they hardcore believe in spending based on how much you make, being really responsible with money, but definitely having some scarcity mindset around money because they're always looking forward to the month where there might not be money. So they taught that to me very early. Fast forward to my adult life, to being a self-employed woman, I had to face all my money fears. I had to become very real, and I had to own my discomfort with numbers. So because I was never good with numbers, I just assumed that I was never good with money either. And I also thought for a long time that money was such a bad word. Honestly, who wants to talk about money? Who wants to say how much they want to make? Who wants to be bold enough to say that they want to make money? Especially as a helper, as a service provider, that seemed to be so wrong. So I am tired of that conversation. I feel that women are stepping away from their power of co-creation, of abundance, of being powerful, because money does get you power, whether you like it or not. That is truthful. It doesn't get you power. You having money is just stepping into your power, if that makes sense. The money doesn't give you necessarily status. It gives you status, and that I suppose gives you power. But you understanding and accepting that you can have a money flow and that you can have you can be educated on money and that you can talk about money without any shame or any fear judgment is so important for you to have your finances aligned with who you are and with your values. And you will discover, like I did, that one didn't take the other. That me being a helper did not mean that then I had to be broke because all the help had to be given for free. So after asking high and low everywhere, and this is true, you don't know this, but this is true, I've asked everyone. Finally, my copywriter said, hey, I think I've got somebody for you. And she gave me a name, and she was not wrong. So obviously she knows who I work with, and she was very specific about who she referred. And so I am very happy to introduce you to our guest, Rachelle Siebke. She is a money coach for women, but she specifically works with life coaches and solopreneurs. But I want you to know this, whether you are in business or not, you want to hear this conversation. This is why I brought her into the podcast, regardless of who she helps, because she's in the podcast and she's going to teach us what she does with people who are life coaches. What I've come to understand is that money fears and money insecurities are true to everybody, not just people in business, but of course, people in business, we tend to have to face that. We can't avoid it. We have to face it because it's our responsibility to bring our own income. We have to get up every morning and think of where the income is going to come from. Whereas when you're employed, you know where it's coming from. You just have to show up and do your job, which is not any easier than an entrepreneur, but a bit of less fear, I would say. So, Rachelle, please introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we can just dive in.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This is a really exciting surprise conversation tonight, but I'm down for it. Thanks to Jack for introducing us. She always knows the right people to connect. So my name is Rachelle Siebke, and I'm a money coach, and I've always been a money nerd. It's like my geek out hobby. I really have always enjoyed reading personal finance books. And I'm the kind of person who, if you find me at a party, I'll be in the corner talking to somebody about their deepest desires and dreams and goals. I like those deeper one-on-one connections. And I always wanted to work with women in money, and I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to look like. So every financial advisor I've ever hired, every insurance investment person I've ever worked with is always like, you need to come work for us. But I was like, not that. That wasn't the thing that made me tick. The thing that makes me tick is really asking people, what is it that they want? And the thing that they want so bad in life, we all work for our money in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all working so hard. And oftentimes we're working majority of our day, majority of our life, and never really stopping to think, what are we going to get out of this? So, of course, we have to work to pay our monthly bills, but also what else is it that you want? And that's my favorite part of money coaching. So that's where I get started. And then I help them walk through each of the steps that they need to do to keep those habits and routines in place so that money management really feels like nurturing self-care.
I love that, and I want to go there. How does that even happen? But first, just answer a few personal questions for me. So that my background is in therapy, and I am a life coach and a mindset coach. And of course, questions is my strength. I just want to know you personally. What brought you into this? You were a money nerd, but what made you even have that first interest in money? When do you remember thinking I like the subject of money? You were good in numbers, naturally good in numbers, and so that suddenly just brought you into the money conversation, or what kind of brought you there?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. So I am naturally good with math. I mean, numbers were not that I avoided or anything when I was in school. And I wonder how much this plays into it too. My parents are really good about talking to us about money and how money worked and how debt works, and really put us on a allowance chart from a very young age so that I could see the more work I did, the more money I got at the end of the pay period, right? And so my dad had this very elaborate goal chart system. So I was interested in it then. I know my dad invited me to sit in with his investment advisor when he was out at the house. I was getting ready to leave for work. I worked 3 jobs in high school because I really wanted my freedom and my independence. And my parents valued work. And so they were like, well, you're not really an adult until you work 40 hours a week. And so by the time I was 18, I was working 40 hours a week. I was still in high school. I would leave high school for the co-work class that I could get more hours in. And so I was leaving for work. I was dressed to go to the grocery store. I was leaving for work. And my dad was like, hey, why don't you come in here and talk to Bob? He's talking to us about our Roth IRAs. And so I sat down and he gave me the chart of if you start investing now versus if you start investing then. And I just remember being I'm definitely doing that. So I started my first Roth IRA when I was 18 or 19. So that I was interested in it then. really became much more interested in it when I had my daughter at 19. So I was a single teenage mom. And then now everything really was up to me. So everything that I wanted for myself, I wanted to make sure that my daughter had those things. And I wanted to make sure that she had all the opportunities that she wanted to have. And so that's when money really became important to me. So as I was working through providing for her needs, but also the wants and the desires I wanted her to have and the opportunities that I wanted to be available to her. And so, yeah, I just started tweaking little habits and routines. Just year after year, I would read a different book and I was like, oh, I like the way that they do that. And I would incorporate that into my schedule there. So
that's awesome. And I think that often as parents, we don't think of how we're educating and influencing our children to learn about money. And so you're that simple, like I say simple, but you said it was like even a very well thought chart of chores and money.
Yeah.
Picked your interest and made you understand more work, more money. You probably think differently today. I want to work less and make more money. I want to work smart. But it taught you work ethic. Probably, I'm sure it taught you the importance of work and they value that. And so as a mom, that is my husband too. That's something that we think a lot about. Like, how do we teach Mateo, our son, like the importance, like what money can buy and how can he best invest in well, be smart. And of course, we want him to take over whatever we're building. And we really do hope he has an interest in real estate eventually, because that's what we're leaving him behind. But the thought, and we became late parents. We were not 19. We were like, I was in my late 30s. Still, he's only going to be 2. So late 30s. Thank you. And so we've had a lot of time to think about all these things. But I do believe that if we don't have these conversations, ladies, we're raising our children, daughters and sons to just be, unbeknown to us, a little bit irresponsible with money. Because if we don't talk about it, we're not teaching them proper thinking about it. And so most of us feel stressed when we talk about money. Like, raise your hand if the subject of money gives you a bit of anxiety. If looking at your credit card gives you anxiety, or even your bank account. How many of you look at your bank account every day? Like, that is a habit I picked up a while back, and I love it. I just go in there to express gratitude for every dollar that goes out, because I'm so lucky I was able to have that dollar to give, to spend. And I'm so very thankful for every dollar that comes in. Even if it's 10 cents, I don't know, something happened to my credit card the other day where they returned 10 cents. And I was like, what? That's amazing. You know, whereas I think other times we could have looked at those 10 cents and think that's insane.
Yeah. It's
like, that's nothing.
A positive number on your credit card statement.
Yeah. It's like, what did I do? I obviously didn't return something. So anyway, I think that that's super exciting. So walk us through what you would walk. Like, let's just begin with maybe, I'm sure you break down some of the money insecurities people might have, especially women starting their business. But just women in general, like money mindset, blockages that they have. And if I can add anything, I've done my own work. I'm still doing my own work. Like I self-disclosed earlier, I never thought I was good with money because I never thought I was good with numbers. And numbers was my challenging subject in school. I didn't shy away. I had all the tutors and I passed and I did, all the things that I needed to do. But I will always remember my math teacher just being like frustrated with my lack of understanding and ease at numbers. And so that was my struggle. And I remember just almost like completely pairing, if I'm not good with numbers, I'm not good with money. And like, I thought that if I assume an attitude of I don't care, that I was above that. Like, that then if I don't care, this is never going to be a problem. That proved to be wrong for me because I accumulated a lot of debt in my early 20s just from not caring, not looking at my finances, not understanding, not having conversations with anyone about like, what would be a good way of spending, investing, and all of that. So what's your go-to?
So I really like to go from the vantage point that I believe that there is no one right or wrong decision that you can make with money. Maybe not very popular, right? Because most of our financial advice that we get is very much you should do this and you should not do that.
Right.
But I think that really takes the humanity out of money And there's a human being behind these decisions. And I think it's negligent to ignore our own internal desires and the things that we want. And I think it's unreasonable to think that we're not ever going to make a mistake. So I like to use the analogy of like, there is no one wrong exit ramp that we can ever get off. That means that we can never get back on the right track.
Agreed.
So that's the number one thing I just really like to lay out. There's no judgment in any of the work that we're doing, but also for them, right? So if the people that I'm working with can get to the point where they're able to realize, maybe I would have liked to have done that differently. I know how to do it differently now, but I'm not going to beat myself up for things that have already happened. I think that's a really good place to start. And so really just like laying everything on the table, asking what is it that you want most, really daydreaming. So daydreaming is the number one component of the work that I do. And then from there, we can go on and set up a budget. I set up a budget in a software called You Need a Budget. It's YNAB. It's acronyms that stand for You Need a Budget. It's a cloud-based software. It's a very gamified software. What I like about it is you're determining ahead of time how you're going to spend your money. It's a zero-based budget. So all of the money that comes in, you spend it all down in all of these different categories ahead of time before you spend anything. So you're not just tracking what's already happened. You're really like noticing, this is how much money I have, and of this much money, this much is going to go towards these certain priorities and goals and values. And so what I like to say is, we're not budgeting for discipline's sake. There's no point in budgeting just to see what we already spent. We're budgeting to say hell yes to the things that we want to do.
Oh, I love that. And so what that does obviously create self-awareness of how their current habits of spending, where they, because I would imagine I know for a fact that was the case for me. There was a lack of awareness and mindfulness. Like, I'm now trying to shop mindfully or intentionally, if that makes more sense. And it's shifted my habits of shopping. Whereas before I would just shop like 5 t-shirts because they were $10 at Target and I loved one, so I might as well have it in all colors. I now stop and think, but what do I want my clothing to represent? Like, how do I want to dress? And this is one of my guest speakers who came and taught me that. And I was like, what? Brilliant. I like this way of spending. Yeah. And so I feel far more, I'm still spending money. I'm still shopping. But I am taking a pause. I am determining, why am I doing this and what is it that I really want? Mm-hmm. Do I just want to have 5 t-shirts for the sake of having 5? And so that self-awareness, I would imagine, of just noticing where the money going and then deciding. Awareness gives you decision power, which I think before I was an autopilot. I was just spending money or not spending money or not having conversations or reacting in anger if anybody said anything. Because I'm like, I know, I'll get to it later, right? Because there was zero self-awareness.
Yeah, and I love that idea too of like deciding ahead of time when you go shopping, what is my shopping philosophy? What do I want to spend on? Mm-hmm. So one of the rules that I have when I go clothes shopping, it makes it so easy for me. If it doesn't feel amazing on my body and it doesn't look fantastic, I'm not going to bring it home because I will never pick it out of the closet. If it's itchy, if I can feel the threads, if it has tags in it, like
I'm pulling the top up 5 million times just as I'm looking at it in the mirror. If the shoes are uncomfortable, please don't buy them. I don't care what brand they are. Please, just comfort trumps anything. That's mine. Yes. So there's no judgment, and I felt the anxiety just looking at where my money is going, and then I feel lazy, and I think I'm not the only one, to think about future money coming. Where do I want to spend it? Like that planning to me seems so boring because I am not a detailed human, which is why I outsource that. For me, that was one of, like, my bookkeeper can tell me and project, like, Olga, with this money, we can do this, or, and I love that somebody else is doing that. I also obviously love being informed, but I just knew I would procrastinate. Just that homework, I'll be like, whoa.
We do it together on the phone.
That would be a tough session for me.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy that you do it with them, because if you leave it up to me, I would have so not done
let's talk about that. What would be tough about it for you?
I would find it boring. I would find it, I would also feel that I'm lacking freedom if I predetermine where my money is going. Like, what if? So the reactive person in me that sees something that she wants and wants to get it, and then it was not part of the plan, would really struggle with that decision I made 2 months ago of saying like, yes, but you're only spending $20 on this, so I would feel restrained. My personality would feel restrained.
Because that brings up a really important point, which is one of the reasons I love to use YNAB is they have 4 rules, which make the rules. And I always tell everybody, I'm going to teach you all the rules and then we're going to break them however.
I'll teach you how to break them. Great. I'm listening.
So, because if you're not going to use them, if it's not going to serve you, then what's the purpose of doing it, right? So one of YNAB's rules that they have is to roll with the punches. So you can choose to move the money out of one category and into another category as long as you know and like your decision and why you're doing it.
Responsibility. I like that.
Takes away that restrictiveness a little bit. But it also, what's happening then is by planning ahead with YNAB, what's happening is you're admitting ahead of time, like, yes, Christmas is going to come. Yes, the tires are going to need to be replaced. Yes, the car is going to be.
You think if you don't think about it, you just don't have to deal with it,
Right. Yes. But what happens is, I like this phrase is like, if you have a problem that money can solve, you don't really have a problem. So if you have a problem that you could have been like fully funded, right? So when the tire goes flat and you have $150 in your tire category, like it's no problem whatsoever. Or like we can get real granular with certain people. I get real granular because they really care about those different things. But you can also just like really lump sum do your budget. You can very high level be like, these are housing costs, these are spending costs. And so we don't have to be super granular about like what it is you're spending. But if it's something that you're aware of, I want to cut back on, or if it's something that you're like, I'm just curious, I want to know that I can plan for it, then we'll create a specific category for it. But what I really like about the work that I do with women and their money is setting up that budget template online. So all of my sessions, you just come and hang out with your girlfriend. I'll ask you the questions. And then when you're done, you leave. You don't have a lot of homework. If you do have some things to do, you've seen how I've done it and you know how to do it going forward. And so it's really like just the two of us hanging out and we're just chatting, and I'll ask you some questions so that it matches your values and your alignment. But it's not like go off, figure out this complicated system, and then come back to me.
I do love that I'm hearing throughout all of it, like you started with like a non-judgment approach. And what I'm hearing also throughout it all is like there is permission of decision, and then there's just own responsibility of your decisions. Mm-hmm. So really, which I think is what we avoid when it comes to money, responsibility. We just want to make quick decisions, quick gratification, whatever that is, or fear-based, right? Because then there's the other people who spend zero money because they're so terrified that tomorrow they might have nothing. And then not being happy regardless with what decision you've made because you have a restrictive approach to it that makes you feel guilty no matter what route you take. So like I hear how your first approach to there's no wrong choice, essentially, that you can't get back on the highway and, get back on track. You can't take a turn that is unturnable. There is that solution. And then I hear you say like there is this moment of permission.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it's your money, right? Like, who am I to tell you what you should do with your money? I don't know. And also the people who are writing the financial articles don't know. And also your parents don't know. And also your husband and your spouse, they don't know more than you what you should do with your money.
So walk us through. So like, this is your first time meeting this client. You whatever, hook them up online to like, then they understand the categories. They set this might be their first time setting a budget. Do you do any mindset? Because I already gave you some of my initial, like, no, thank you. I don't think I can do this. And so I can see like, that like, I feel this is where most people need to do mindset work.
Yeah.
Especially when they're
mindset. Mm-hmm. So I've got very specific systems. So there's a budget and there's a debt pay down and there's tracking your net worth. And I've got all of the systems already planned out. So when we come to the session, I go through and I start walking you through. Again, I'm asking questions. I'm recording the session. I'm sharing my screen. But more importantly, when those mindset things come up, I'm helping you address those in a way that's very conversational and just asking you questions to reveal things and give you some insight, some awareness that maybe you haven't slowed down enough to take into account.
So they will be looking at their habits and where those habits come from, even from the way they think or the way what they've seen too, right, happening at home.
Yeah, like sometimes somebody will say, I was on a call the other night that he was saying, my dad worked really hard. He worked 3 jobs, and then as soon as we would get home. So he went and helped his dad with work. And as soon as he would get home, his mom would be like, where's the money? Give me the money. Right. And like, not like go take a shower, have some dinner. Right. It was like, where's the money? Give me the money. And so he had a lot of residual thinking of like, what's the point of working hard? Somebody's just going to take it. Mm-hmm. And so it was just, that awareness, we can start there. Like, okay, if you think that somebody's just going to take your money, then why do you want to do the work? And so we walked back through some of those earlier memories and then also like put a little bit of chinks in the armor, right? Like, who would take it? How much power do they actually have to take it, right? And so like sometimes just like asking like, why? But what would that actually look like? Or, what are you most afraid of, right? Figuring out what those things are can bring a lot of awareness. It doesn't mean that you'll immediately have no, like mindset issues around money, but it is helping you. It's kind of like, it's very much like working with a productivity coach and using a calendar. Like the calendar is the tool that brings up all of the thoughts and all of the things that actually are a problem in your productivity. So when you're using the calendar and you're starting to see like, oh, this is restrictive, or, oh, there's only so much time available to do all these things. And then you have to constrain a little bit to make sure that the things that are most important to you are getting done. Or in terms of money, there's only so much you can cut back on in order to have some extra money for things like investing or saving. And so let's not forget the other side of the equation, which is a lot more fun. We can actually make more money to change some of our perspectives.
I'm sure you read this book, Poor Dad, Rich Dad, when I was still in university. And there's 2 phrases from that book that stuck with me. Of course, when I'm bringing them forward, I can't recall them. But I blanked out. What was I going to say about Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I've read the book. I don't remember exact phrases, but can you remember like along the lines of?
It had to do with you were just sharing. It's going to come back to me. I hate when this happens, but
it will come back. Don't worry about it.
It left my brain. A great book nonetheless, everybody listening. If you haven't read that book, there's so many good points in there. I don't remember what I was going to say, but the main point of this book is that no matter the circumstances you were raised and how your family has taught you to think and behave around money, that there's never a turning point. You could change that if you don't like it, if it doesn't bring you the results you want to see in your life, that there's a way around learning new ways of behaving with money that will resemble what you want, and what you want is attached to your values and what's important to you. So I think that that's so important. And that awareness, you can only get it with coaching. Have somebody look at your blind spots. Honestly, like I got free money coaching from my husband, who's got like zero, he might have some money mindset, but like very, I don't know, it's hard to even spot them, as I'm sure you might feel that way. Whereas I was doing work this morning where I still have fears like, will anybody pay that? Like, right. So like they will come up in different ways. And I wanted us to just grab this conversation over to the biggest blockages people have with regards to money, because you do talk about desires and just getting what they want. And so I think that the not feeling enough and not being enough can be something that gets on the way of us achieving wealth specifically. Something that I work on a lot with my clients is that you can have it all. You just have to decide that you want it all and what all means to you, right? I don't subscribe to, I can only have a good marriage, but then my finances suck, or I'm really good making money, but then I have a terrible love life, which, come to think about it, I used to believe that way, like you can't have it all, so choose. What do you want? Now I subscribe to, I can have it all, and I decide what all means, right? Like I get to choose what that means to me. And so I work on that belief, like constantly, like I can have it all. Like it's only my perception that says I cannot have that one thing. What are some of the ones that you see most commonly come up as you're working with people, like the biggest blockages that they might have as it relates to their ability to have?
Yeah, I think a lot of us don't have a conscious awareness of this, but a lot of it comes down to relationship with self and looking for external validation. So when we become attached to our value, like what we can achieve or what we can create, what we can make, when we conflate the two and we start to think like, my business successes are what validates me as a worthy human being, right? Or like, or I will be able to be proud of myself, or my dad will finally be able to be proud of me if I do X, Y, and Z. I think sometimes when we get those attached, it can really lock us up and inflate the fear, right? So if the thing that we're most afraid of is that we're going to find out that we're not good enough to be able to do the thing, then we don't want to go after the thing because we don't want to find out that actually, yes, all the things that we've always thought about ourselves not being good enough is true. But when we're able to see like money is money and my value and my worthiness are unquestionably already taken care of, then we start to realize like, oh, a lot of this fear that I'm feeling is just a sensation in my body and it's temporary and it doesn't mean anything about me. So I would say like of all the things with money work, all of it has to do with external validation and worthiness and your relationship with yourself. But there's lots of other ways that it shows up as well.
Like?
So I would say just like upper limit beliefs, such as I'll never be able to make that much money. I've never made that much money before. So how would that happen? Which I love that one because it's so funny. Our brains are so tricky. Because if I asked you, do you remember the first time you made money?
Yeah.
Okay. Like if you feel comfortable, do you want to share like what kind of value amount do you think that would have been the first time you made money?
I would say maybe $200 a month.
Okay.
At a retail store, Yeah.
So if everybody wants to kind of play along and write this down, I would love for you to like get out a piece of paper and just write down like, okay, $200 a month is the first time I can remember making money. Mm-hmm. For some of you, it might be like, oh, I had an allowance and I made $1 a day, or I made, right? But like that first time you can remember making money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You write that down. And so then the next question I like to ask is like, do you remember, did you have a job in high school and how much money did you make there? So for me, I was a waitress at a Pizza Hut. It was $2.35 an hour plus tips, right? So like I specifically remember the time in my life where I made $2.35. And so then like after you graduated college, do you remember what your first job was then?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so like if you write down like what you can remember that salary being. And so the point of the exercise going through is like, what do we know for sure? For me, when I look for the evidence that I know for sure, what I see is I've always made more money than I have in the past. And yet my brain's only evidence that it's collecting is like, we've never made that much money before, so it's not possible. But the only evidence I actually have is I always make more money than I have in the past.
I love this. I was just talking to somebody who came to the podcast, and I don't know in which order I'm doing this, so I can't say if it's already released or not for those of you listening. And her words, I actually wrote them down on a sticky note because I love it. She said, you gotta believe before you see the evidence versus like see the evidence and then believe, right? But this is evidence, ladies. This is evidence that you have always made more money. I use a similar approach to overcoming issues. Like, I work with people who are very afraid of many things, and rightly so, especially my fertility clients, because we've had so many losses. We can only assume we're going to have one more loss. So you start like a pregnancy already afraid of the day they tell you baby's gone. And that is exactly what I use. Like, listen, look, not this specifically, but look back at your life. Anything bad that has happened, you've overcome it. That's the only evidence you have. So your brain is trying to freak out about the future that is unknown. And that what if it's bad enough that I cannot overcome it? So what if it's bad enough that I won't make the amount of money, that much money? And you're right. Like my only fear is when I raise my prices. It's like, who am I to do it? It comes back to who am I to say this is how much I want to charge? And when I break that into hours, I'm like, that is justifiable. Like there is, but regardless of that, justifiable or not, like I think that has to do with the self-worthiness. And for anybody listening, I have to tell you, I feel so bad that I used to judge business people so much as a social worker. It's like they're bad people. They only care about making money. I'm not saying this is everybody in business, but I have never worked as hard on myself and personal growth as I have since being self-employed. It's a reality I have to face every single day. Is like, where's my mindset today? What's happening? How am I feeling? What am I doing with my company? I am the CEO. Like, what am I doing? Like, there's people working under me. And I have to show up to the best of my ability. So yeah, have some grace for us out there doing our best.
So 2 quick things I want to touch on if I can remember them both. You just mentioned fear, and like one of the things that I've read recently and is really resonating with me in my own personal work right now, as you said, like there's no work like the personal work that you do when you are creating
your future
of your dreams.
Yeah,
you're really putting yourself out there. It's like, okay, the actual work of the business is hard, but what's really challenging is the personal growth and personal development work. And so one of the things I've been working on recently, and I had read it in, I believe it was a tantric text, and he was talking about how language really trips us up. So in the English language, we use the words, I am afraid. And what he did was like the second line of the text, he removed the word am and put an equal sign. I equal afraid. So what we're doing when we're using that language, we're really confusing ourselves and self-identifying with an emotion. But what we know for sure about emotions are they are temporary and they process through. They're physical sensations in our body that are not meant to last.
This is like my language because I teach mindfulness. And so my mentor taught me a long time ago, how many times do you say, I am anxious. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is that your identity becomes anxiety. Like, I am not Olga, I am anxious, right? Like, that's who I've become. So everything in your body is like aligning with that thing. So I am afraid, I can see like, yeah, equal. Same with the brain not understanding negatives, right? Like, I don't want that. I don't want war is I take, like, doesn't read the don't. I want war. Okay, like, no, that's not what I want. It's the opposite. So being so specific about what we do want when we're talking.
Small shift there is just like when your brain says like, I am afraid, you can be like, okay, we're feeling afraid right now. Right.
Yeah.
I talk about myself and my brain in like a we fashion now.
So I'll teach you one thing that my mentor taught me. There is anxiety. So nobody owns the body. There is anxiety. There is fear. So like, you're not even owning it anymore. Like, there is fear. I can see it and I can feel it. But just saying there is anxiety or there is fear takes away like the being, that feeling.
Yes, just there is anxiety. Yes, I love that too. So the I am is one of the things I wanted to touch on, and I did forget the other one already, but it will come back to me too with your Rich Dad Poor Dad download.
Hopefully they're together somewhere. They'll just be like, these ladies really need to get their shit together, and let's just help them now. So let's talk about results and finding those results. Like, I just want to talk about the average person who's got a salary, who might not be thinking money. Like, they probably read the title and they're like, oh, money mindset, whatever. Why would I want to know anything about money? I love your life experience, which is so different from mine. Like, I worked so fucking hard to get pregnant. Like years and years and years. And they did tell me, you kiss your boyfriend and you become pregnant. All through high school, I believe that. So later I was like, you were wrong the entire time. And I was going to have to be working so intentionally towards this child. But sharing that, because I think it drastically changes our sense of responsibility. And what I've become since being a mom is an even much better human, because I had to think so much about my legacy, what I want to teach, so much intentionality has gone through. Like you were saying earlier, when you had your daughter, you were not just thinking about what you want, but what you want for her. That would have been so foreign to me at 19, 20, probably even 30, where I was like, me, and a little bit more of me. Not so much. I come from a family of 5, so okay, having to share my everything with like 4 siblings, and not me 5, would have made me think about other people a bit more. But I would say that our regular mom or a regular human who might be thinking money is not for me, who may not have had like a life experience like yourself, where you became very early aware of like, oh yeah, money is how I get to like provide and leave a legacy and support somebody, not just myself. What would you say, like, what can we tell to the average person who's thinking money is not important to her, who's thinking like, that's not for me?
I love this question because one of the questions that I ask in the very first session that we do together is, if you could do anything with your calendar tomorrow, right? Like if tomorrow you woke up and you had an excess amount of time, an excessive amount of money, what would you do with your time? And often my clients will say things like, I'd read a book in the hammock. I'd, make dinner together with my family. Well, we would walk after work. We would, so notice all of these things actually don't take a lot of cash, but what we end up doing is, and we regulate them to the end of our life when we have nothing left to do, no money left to make, and no time left to spend doing something productive. But when I ask my clients, what do you want your life to really look and feel like? Very often they get very clear throughout the session, throughout the course of all the questions that I ask. Very often what they want most out of life is really very attainable for them. They're just not putting it in their day. And so what I say about that is like doing this work around your money and figuring out what are we working for? What are we looking to attain? When you know very specifically, like, I want to go on this type of vacation. I want to have this sort of like yoga class once a week, or I want to have a massage once a month, or like whatever specifically it is for you. Once you know that and start putting it together, that's when you get the life that you want, right? So this is the other thing that I really like to point out. We often think, when I get this, then I will get that. My experience is first I decide and then it happens, but only every time. I decide and that's when it happens.
Oh, I love it. I decide that this can be accessible to me, and then I find a way to that goal. I'll share a story that I was sharing with a client. She's like, that's unusual. And so I want to share it with people because as unusual as it is, I think is what's brought the lifestyle that I have today. So I don't work more than 24 hours a week, 25 hours a week. And my entire 20s and 30, like early 30s, but my entire 20s, I always thought at some point I'm going to be my own boss because I'm going to be a mom and I want to be a present mom. Like that to me was like such, like you talk about values. That's what money will buy for me. Money will buy me time to raise my child. I cannot add values. Like I was crying my eyes out thinking like my son's going to be 2. And I just think of like, I'm going to cry again because that's just what I do. The honor that has been to be his mom, to see him like just make improvements. And like I just started sending him to daycare 2 weeks ago. So I'm still very emotional at that. Letting go, and it's for his best interest. So just feeling that gratitude, that holy macro, my life supports what really is important to me. And what really is important to me is to be his mom. And so not only that, it supported me making him because it cost me hundreds, like a lot of money to make him because we were going to need so many treatments that I never thought we would. But, you know, thankfully I had thought. So when my husband and I met, we decided that we loved the lifestyle of the retired people. You know, you see them at brunch on a Wednesday morning, you're like, what the fuck? I want that. Or you're like, they will often joke about like, I don't know if it's Sunday or Tuesday. You know, every day feels like a weekend. And we're like, we want that. So we met, my husband and I met when he was 27 and I was 31. We were very like early still on and we had nothing to our names. Okay, we had one. That's it. And so I shouldn't say nothing. That's a lot. That was it. But we're like, we are going to sell everything we own and we're just going to think of how can we invest that little and buy everything we own again, like our tiny townhouse, and see how we can just live the life of the retired people. And then we went to do a vision board. For those of you who don't know, we just collected photos of all the wonderful things we wanted, from like beautiful cottages to just words. And we're like, yeah, health, we want health. And so we did that. And then my husband is French and they talk about doors instead of homes. So I want to have this many doors. And I'm like, doors? Why do we want to have doors? Like, I remember this conversation, like, that's so stupid. Like, doors? Like, what will doors do for us? He's like, those are real estate properties. Like, he's always had, like, that creative, bigger picture. And I'm like, oh, I like that. So, yes. So we figured out that real estate could really give us the cash flow to live the retired life at an early age. So we aim for that. And me opening my business and him going to real estate, he became a realtor in Canada. You have to have a brokerage license to be able to sell and buy homes. I know in some countries that's not, but I imagine in the States it's the same. And that's how we started. And very quickly, we're able to just begin to have some cash flow without meeting hours of work. And we're like, that's exactly what retired people do. You know, they're getting this money and they're not working all these hours. And of course, for me, starting my business, I put a lot of hours because there's so much that you have to get done to start something. But my first initiation to having my own business, Olga's Way, was born in a half-hour coaching session that a life coach gave me for free. And she asked me, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I'm like, I would open a space where I'll be coaching women and I'll be doing. And I had such a clear vision. Even though 10 years prior to that, I had been saying, I'm going to be my own boss at some point. I had never sat down to say how. And so I'm just living proof of what you're saying. The clarity of what you will get with that money. So my lifestyle that today I enjoy, I enjoy working 25 hours a week. And I could, like some weeks I work less because I so choose to. So if I want to not send my son to daycare, I can just spend the day with him. And my bills are still getting paid. My lifestyle hasn't suffered. So I wholeheartedly believe the importance of having the clarity. I would have never made it to this point without knowing what I wanted to do, like what would money buy me that I really value. So like these beliefs that I had that money were bad for, people who didn't care about loving feelings, went out the window when I attached them to what would money mean to me? What would I do? And now I have like this crazy, you probably know Stacey Beeman, because yes. So she's a life coach for life coaches, but it's a money making life coach. So she makes you think of how to make money. And I enjoy listening to her podcast. And she said in one of her podcasts that she made her first million, she made it when she thought to herself, oh, I could make $1 million. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, it's true. I have never set that intention. I have never thought that is a reality. And so now I just daydream, what would I do if I had $1 million? I'm like, I'll pay my parents' mortgage. I'll pay my I just had like all these ideas of what I would do with this money that get me even more excited to the goal of one day making $1 million. So to your point, I think that anybody listening to this podcast should definitely be looking at the specifics of your goal, of like what, like, and I think that value, when we talk about values, I don't always understand what you mean. Like, I respect humans, like what does that mean? But what do you give importance, and how can saving money or paying out your debt or whatever it is that you're working towards your money do for you? Should you do that? Once that's done, like what's your reward almost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, that values mean different things to different people. But really what we're talking about is, what are you doing with all of this energy exchange that you're giving in the world every day, right? You're going to work every day. Most of us are working the majority of our day, the majority of our week, the majority of our life. What is it that we hope to get out of it? And how much of what we're consuming are we actually applying to those specific things that we want? So a few of the things that you can ask yourself, and I do think there's a value in having this conversation with somebody else, specifically a coach, but with anybody, is really asking, like, if you could have everything, if you could have anything, what would you want most? Is to have it. There's something about not having that conversation by yourself that leaves you kind of like required to answer, that you can't just get up and leave and go do the dishes or something else, right? Like, oh, this is uncomfortable. How about I go do something else? Isn't there laundry to fold or something?
My favorite thing.
Right. Favorite procrastination tool. But like having somebody else to sit while you respond, right? So that you will be shocked how much you actually know, right? Very often we'll hear people say like, well, I just don't know what I want. It's like, actually what my coach likes to say is, actually, women do know what they want. They've just already decided that they probably can't have it. So if they can't have that, then what else is available to them? And they're like, well, actually, I don't even want that, right? It's like we self-qualify and say that we can't have the things that we want. But if we really were to like open ourselves up, what's the thing that you do want the most? Another fun exercise is, if you had $1 million, how would you spend it, right? Like if you had $1,000, right? It depends what your price point is that we're aiming for. I don't want to have a conversation about money and only use big numbers, because as you were saying earlier, like the 10 cents is also like an important part of the journey, right? But like when we're really thinking about like, we believe that that's not available to us, or you like the belief that you were talking about that was like, oh, rich people don't care. Rich people don't have feelings. They don't care about helping people. Like how much of it, like how many people would you actually be able to help if you had $1 million? And how much of that can you do right now? Here's the other thing that I'm really passionate about. Very often we think that when we become rich, we'll become givers. I just want to like really stop and challenge. Is that actually true? That that's how it works? Because let's imagine this, right? If I'm making $100,000 a year and I'm giving nothing to the charity or the cause that I'm passionate about, And I'm thinking, well, when I have $1 million, I'll give 10% to that cause. When I get to $1 million, to do 10% of $1 million, I'm going to have to cut that money out of somewhere. Because humans have a voracious appetite. We use everything that is available to us. So if you don't start giving at the point where you are today, whether it's time or money, are you really going to get to a point where you have so much money that you can just cut out a big percentage and like you're just magically going to have this money that you're not going to need and you're not going to have spent and you're not going to have allocated for anything else?
And this is what I personally believe, that I like solving my mindset drama, my money drama that is in my head. Mm-hmm. Now, as my bank account might be smaller than whatever my goal is, because I can imagine the more money that comes in, these habits that I might have that are not healthy will only grow with the amount of money in it, right? Yeah. So when we think like, oh no, but I won't be struggling about how much money I spend once I make more money, it's not true, because you have more money at your disposal, so you'll be spending more with the same habit that you already created, which I think is so important to talk about money habits. Because there are just mental habits that you've created that you haven't stopped to become conscious about, like you were saying earlier. Like it's just that consciousness of saying, understanding yourself and your reactions. Like I am an impulse buyer and I love it. I'm like, oh my God, I helped somebody and I bought something and and then I just go around my day and I don't think about it twice. But if I start doing that with, like if I'm not aware that that's my nature and that I need to some censoring and like stop, think, do you really need, do you want this, but you have to have it. But like if I don't, like, just because I could have it doesn't mean I should, or that it's smart way of using my money. Having a pause for me is important.
I had a really fun conversation with a client yesterday, and she was saying, you know what I realized is that it's not the $1,000 decisions and more that get me into trouble. What gets me into trouble, I'm using quotes here in case you can't see, because again, I don't believe that there's a right or a wrong decision or an exit ramp off of being able to get where you're trying to go. But she's like, what gets me in trouble is usually the $100 or less decisions, because I just don't hold any weight on them.
You don't think about them. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't think about them. She's like, and I asked her, if you were to rate the joy of return on the under $100, where would it be? She's like, oh, like a 3, right? And this is for her specifically, but this is a good thing for you to like check in and notice, right? So she's like, over $1,000 experiences, I never regret. She's like, I'm always like 100% into them because I've maybe spent some time thinking about them. I'm like, okay, this is an investment. Are you gonna use it? Are you really gonna get what you want out of it? But she's like, for the under $100 decisions, I just don't even take them seriously, and I just get whatever I want impulsively. But she doesn't like that about herself, right? But I just want to point that out because sometimes we can actually be impulsive and love that about ourselves. We don't have to fix those things. But if we're feeling impulsive and not loving it, then those are the things that we can pay attention to and change.
I want to ask you about this because this is a conversation I had actually with my teammate, so a person that works in my company. And she was like, wow, all these women invest in themselves, like in coaching. Like to her, that's like so, wow, really? And she's looking at ages like, wow, some of them are younger than me. Like in her mind, like, why would they spend their money, or what made them want to think that was an important investment? And so let's talk about that. Our ability, our willingness to invest in self, because I feel that that's another blockage for, especially for women, that we are so willing to buy somebody anything. She's like, if it's for my mom, I'll spend the money. But for me, oh God, who am I to be spending? And I'm sure you find that as a coach. I find that as a coach, where like a recent example, my CEO ladies were going to a retreat and it's $500. And they all knew how much it was and they all have committed to it. And as it's coming time to pay, I can get to see the anxiety that is provoking to some of them, like, oh my God, how much money am I going to spend? And they're now ambivalent towards. So I do some coaching around like, well, what does that mean about your worthiness that you're trying to work so much towards, right? Like you have been trying to say like, I am deserving of all things I want. So what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts? How do you coach people through their ambivalence towards investing in self. And I know in business, we are a little bit more open. Like we've realized by now that investing in ourselves is actually pretty amazing. Most people in business.
Yeah. Me personally, I don't coach people on that unless they're coming to me to be coached for it. Right. So like if I was having a consult call and somebody was like, if they weren't all in when I said the investment, I don't tend to coach them on it unless they ask me to. Right. If they were to say like, I really want in, but I'm scared, then we might have that conversation. I remember what it felt like to be afraid. And like the very first time I paid somebody on the internet $2,500, and I was like, if people find out, they're for sure going to have me committed. I'm like, I don't know what this is, some sort of snake oil or whatever. Like, I didn't know what was, I just had no idea what the possibility was. So for me, I really needed to make the investment. I needed to believe that the investment was worth it so that I could get the results that I needed, right? Like I could really tap into what was available to me through me believing in me. And then I'm able to do like next level ones, right? So like right now, I invest 100% of the time I'm interested in something. It might not be right away, but I'm like, I know for sure I'm doing that. And I usually have a very long list of people that I want to work with. And I know who I want to work with and why. So one of the things that you said earlier that I thought was really interesting was when you said, you can't have it all, right? So you're doing the belief work around whether or not you can have it all, right? Like this great marriage and money. And one of the things that I really believe to be true about coaching is like, there's so many systems out there to help me have everything I want. And what I really think about investing is like, I'm going to invest at one level at a time, do the one thing, get that one thing underway, get some good habits and routines around that, and then go on to the next thing when I'm ready, right? And so like, I never know what the next thing's going to be. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I want to work on my business. I want to work on my money. I want to work on organization. Right? Like sometimes I have very specific things. And sometimes I'm actually just really drawn by inspiration. And for me, I never go wrong when my heart like leaps up when I see something, that's when I know like I'm going to get something out of that. I think it's different for everybody. So yeah, I'm interested. What would you say about that?
I agree with you. So my first business coach cost me $5,000, and I was just opening my business, and I remember thinking, dear God, please make like this should really work for me. Like it was such a fearful exchange. And then it didn't work for me because she was like 5 steps ahead of where I was. And she should have been more honest when she met me and said like, listen, my level of coaching is not for you. So I learned 2 things throughout investment. And I always think like, listen, if I'm learning, then that's what I paid for. You know, that was I'm still learning. But I learned 2 things from her, like the fear that I had of investing in self. Because what if I don't have the results that will, my investment will be then paid for? Like I'm always thinking like, how is this going to pay me back? And the second thing I thought is that as a coach, I was never, ever, ever going to just to sell something, just to make money, that I would get people in that were not at the right level for me to coach them. So that was an incredible lesson, but that fear was awful. And I thought to myself, what does that say about my own self? Like, why do I think that if it's for me, that's a lot of money? And like, I almost felt like I owe something to someone, so I better make it work. Like I really tried hard to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like the exchange of it. So I still had some scarcity mindset as I started my business, which I think is normal because
I think so too. And actually, I almost don't even like to use the word scarcity and abundance because to me, there's such buzzwords in the industry right now. And there's almost like shamification around if you have scarcity. And I just don't know that anybody ever gets to the place where they don't have scarcity. Like, I think it's always, to me, it's something that's always going to come up, and it's just something to be aware of. It's like meditating. Some days you're going to be in the zone, and sometimes you're going to fall out.
The majority of them you want to be.
Yeah, to me, thought work and scarcity, abundance, like all of those things are awareness, and really comes down to like present moment thinking. And we're never actually going to ascend to this place where we don't have.
You never have it. Yeah, and so
the other word I really like to use, I'm just sorry to interrupt you there, but the other word I really like to use is sufficiency. And I never hear that word when we're talking about money. I always hear scarcity and I always hear abundance. But Lynn Twist wrote the book, The Soul of Money, and she has a lot of talk about sufficiency in that book. And I really love that as, I wouldn't even say it's neutral, but like if we're going to think positive, negative, neutral, I think it's really interesting to have so much conversation on like scarcity and abundance, but not have a middle, like a middle.
And I like the sufficiency comes from enoughness, right? Which I, again, will feel. So when I talk about scarcity, I believe with my entire existence that there's two trains of thoughts, fear and love. Like all your thoughts go through types of energy. So my fear base, and so today as I was brainstorming with my team and we were brainstorming ideas, I was so aware of the fearful thoughts I was having, and I was writing them down. Like, this is how I do my mental work. I'm like, this shit just came out of nowhere and hit me in my move to progress. Just as I'm saying, I would love to do this and this will be in the best interest of people, I immediately ruined it for myself. Some sabotage, like another thought that came and said that, yeah, but nobody will be interested in that. And so I know it's my own mental drama that I have to work on. But you were talking about this investment, which made me think of it. I had a coach, my most recent coach said to me, Olga, you need to quit offering like low ticket coaching. I had one that was a membership that was very low cost. And what ended up happening, it became like a gym membership. People pay, but it wouldn't show up. And that's not how I want to coach. And like, I want to see results. Like that wasn't gratifying. My bank account loved it, but I didn't love it. So I changed it entirely. And I started paying attention to that, like exactly what your client was talking about. Where we don't invest much, which we convince ourselves, I am worthy of less. Like, I don't want to spend too much on myself because it's me. So I'm just going to spend a little bit. It ends up being a waste of money entirely. So in the end, it's a lot of money because if you're not utilizing it at all, because you've already minimized it so much to the point that, oh, why would I pay that little money? Yeah, how much is it going to give me? We don't value it as much, which has really helped me in reframe my own pricing for myself, because I realized the coach that I paid $25,000 to work with, you bet I didn't miss a call. You bet I knew exactly what I was meaning. Like, I knew how to send her documents. I knew all things. And because any minute that she was talking, I was like, I'm ready. I'm listening. I gave you a lot of my money that I worked so hard to have.
Yeah.
So I do, like, what is, like, I don't even know what we're telling people right now, but I just want people to invest in themselves. And I just want to know that, like, I want you to know that exchange has so much to do with your inner work, that when you spend a little bit because you think that's essentially unconsciously, you think that that's your worthiness, you don't invest as much also of your time and energy. So your results will like match pretty much your level of investment. Not always.
We have this really not helpful idea of return on investment, which sometimes we want to be aware of. If we're putting money in an investment, what is our return? But I think sometimes when we sign up for a business program or even a coaching program that we're doing like for a personal life, when we're thinking about what the return on investment is, especially for a business, it's like, well, if I put $25,000 in here, I better make sure that I get $25,000 back before I do the next thing, because otherwise I didn't get the full value over here. And I just want to say, like, my returns don't actually come back to me in the exact dollar amount, in the exact way, in the exact time frame that I want. But I don't make that mean that it's not working.
Yeah, because you don't believe in failure. Neither do I, right? Like, there is not such a thing. I either win or I learn, and both things are a win, right? Like, so.
Well, and I think a lot of times with business programs specifically, like, you tell me if this is different for you, but for most people that I talk to with business programs specifically, I think they have the idea that they'll put in the money on the return on the investment. And by the time the program is over, they'll have made the money back. Otherwise, they didn't do it right.
Otherwise, the coach was not good.
Yeah.
And so what's lacking there is that responsibility, that sense of responsibility. What am I doing with, like,
well, maybe, but also, like, who's to say that it's supposed to come back in 6 months?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
True.
Like, it might actually come back fourfold 3 years from now because of this coaching, because of this experience. I like to think of masterminds or those sorts of things as like throwing out wildflower seeds. Like, I have no idea. It's none of my business when those seeds are going to sprout, which ones are going to grow. Like, I have no idea. I'm just out there showing up in the world, doing the work that I care about. If it helps somebody and they want to reach out, then yeah, but there's always seeds that are sprouting. I just don't know what they all are. It's not really my job to know what they are. It's just my job to go out there and plant them.
Yeah. And I do think that if I look at how much I've invested in my own, like, mentors and coaches and business coaches and life coaches and therapists and naturopaths, like, all the doctors, like fertility experts, I have invested in all of them. Not everything brought me the results that I invested thinking they would. But at the end of the day, every single one of those exchanges have been a very important step forward towards working in my dreams. Yeah. Because I do feel that
step on the path, and the only thing that we can do is like pull on the next thread of interest. Right? We don't know, but here's what happens, right? If you're not exactly sure and you only invest in the things that you're 100% sure of, what ends up happening is you don't do anything because you can't convince yourself that you're 100% sure. So thank you so much for saying that. Like, not everything you invest in gave you the exact result, but they were still important to get you to where you are today. So I just really like to kind of break brains wide open when we're thinking about what does return on investment look like. And the other thing I would say, specifically with women, thinking about investments in ourselves, if there's a whole system in place specifically that teaches us that we're not supposed to do that. So it's okay if we think that. We've just been taught that our whole lives. We just get to decide if that's something that we actually, is that mine? Is that my belief? Do I want that one? Or do I think that maybe it's okay for me to also get what I want?
Yeah, to be powerful and to retire your husband if you wish. Why not have trophy husbands around? I think that's amazing.
Right. Or whatever the thing is that you
Yeah. Like being retired, like living the life of a retired person. Like, to me, the carrot is not retirement anymore. I cannot imagine retiring from what I do. I love it so much. It's not
right.
We took a 2-week vacation this summer and we were both like, is it time to go back home yet? Like, we got to go back to what we do that we love so much.
Yeah.
And it's not so
also available to you if you're working a corporate job.
100%.
You, like 100% of the time. What can you bring into your daily life today that's going to make you enjoy life a little bit more? Like, enjoying life is always available to you. And so when we approach life that way, like, who wants to retire if you don't, like, retire is fun, 100%. Like, I definitely like to have time off, but I don't want to live my whole life so that I can retire.
Exactly. Or wait until all stars align for me to say, now I get to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is my own personal belief. I don't believe in heaven or hell because I don't believe in any faith specifically. But I have lived hell and heaven in this life experience.
That's such an interesting perspective too.
Mm-hmm. So I feel that it is my responsibility. That's why I talk about responsibility. My responsibility to make of this living experience, this moment, whatever makes me feel most fulfilled. So that when I'm dying, which I have this conversation before in the podcast because I've been close to that a few times. So it's not like a foreign concept to me that I'll only get to die when I'm 80. I'm like, oh shit, I almost did die when I was 10. That when I'm in that scenario, again, and I hope it's not for a very, very, very long time, universe, you hear me? I want to look back and say, it's good. I'm okay. I can do this now because I didn't wait all year. I don't have all these regrets of all the things that I wish I would have done. Like, I took every moment like if it was my last one. So I would ask myself, and I'm human, so not every moment, but I do often try to ask myself, am I parenting the way that makes me really happy? Am I wifing the way that makes me happy about the type of wife I'm showing up? I'm almost never thinking, is he making me happy? It's like, how am I contributing to my life? Am I doing the work like that? The brainstorming I was having today was so freaking exciting because I'm like, what would my favorite things to coach on? Like, how do I want to coach this program? Like, I'm the boss. But I've done this with my health, with all aspects of my life. And I encourage you listening to us to think of that. Like, happiness is in your hands. It's only handmade and by you. So what are some of those thoughts? Because it might not even be actions, thoughts that you need to have today about your reality that allows you to stand in it with an open heart, with more gratitude, with just a different way of looking at that reality that you're living right now that is not so heavy for you, that you're not waiting, that you have this carrot tingling in front of you that you're like, okay, I guess I'll have to have one more bag for me to be happy, or pay one extra bill less and then I'll be happy. Like, how is happy? Like, how I said I get to define what all is to me. So at all times I always have everything, because I get to say what everything is. So if I get to determine this is everything, I'm always happy thinking I've got it all. So you also get to decide what happy means to you today. So if your expectations are like in Jupiter, just bring them back to Earth and like come back to like what's going on for you today and how what will happy look like for you with the circumstances you have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say too, like, happy is also a fleeting emotion that we're not actually supposed to 100% stay
attach.
So just like we were talking about fear, like, it is a sensation in our body that our body processes and is like not meant to be an everlasting thing. So, don't put so much pressure on yourself to be happy all the time. And to me also, like, happiness is always available in the moment of presence, right? And so, like, not needing everything to be done in order to be able to be happy is also a really important perspective that I'm.
So I would agree. Well, in mindfulness, we say there is no problem. You have no problem in the present time. Like, none. Think about it. What worries you is not here. Mm-hmm. It hasn't happened. It does not exist. Yeah. Past or future, and you think it might happen. And when you are going to the darkest hour, somehow you are a superhero because you're just like pulling up your socks and you're in action mode, solving your problem, looking for that help, getting out of the mud. So,
yeah. Well, that's the thing that I had forgotten that I was going to say.
Oh, good.
Which was that what I have learned about myself is that when I worry and catastrophize, the worst case scenarios, those never happen. But I have lived through some worst case scenarios that I could never have dreamt of or prepared for.
Same.
And when I'm in that moment, I just handle it.
Like a boss.
And you will too, because you're human. Like you said, like 100% of the time you have survived. And how do we know that? Because you're still here. So I think that was the biggest breakthrough for me about catastrophizing is like, I spent so much time catastrophizing these like really small, detailed, worst case scenarios. None of those have ever happened.
And then I'm always surprised when I still remember the day that a doctor told me, you will never conceive. Like, not even with IVF. Like, forget about it. Like, they canceled me out. They didn't want my money. They didn't want me, my presence. Like, see ya. Bye-bye. If you would have told me that I was going to hear this from a doctor 2 years into my trying to conceive journey, I would have told you that would kill me. That would be the end of me trying, and my emotions would chat into a million pieces, which I was already so emotional and so hormonal, I can only imagine. And what happened was that I looked at him and I'm like, not you and not anybody gets to tell me when and how I become a mom. I'm looking for another opinion. See ya. And I found a doctor who did it. I look back and like, who the fuck was that woman? Because I would have never imagined that I could have handled it. And I just want to echo that. Listen to us right now. You are your superhero. You don't even have to call for her. She will freaking show up when you need her most. And it will slap you in the face when you're like, how did I handle that? Like, I did that? How? You cannot possibly plan for all potential outcomes in life. All you can do is trust that whatever comes your way, you are prepped for it. And if you are not, you will know to look for somebody who is. Right? Like if what you need is legal advice, don't worry, there's lawyers and you will find the best people. So I call upon the best possible humans to show up in my life to help me co-create, and they showed up and I believed in that. And so, yeah. Anyways, that's just a long story, but I think that it's so true. You cannot plan for the catastrophizing that we do as much as we think is prepping us. Is just ruining your moment. Like all is good. And is not giving you anything extra for the future. Ladies, thank you so much for listening. I've overtaken this way past our podcast time. It is an important subject of conversation and one that I was dying literally to have here in the podcast. Rachelle, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at RachelleSiebke.com and sign up for the money guide resources. We've got a lot of fun stuff on there that you can go check out.
I like that. Thank you for this very short notice and for the willingness to show up and just share it with my audience. I have enjoyed this podcast very much. I would encourage anybody who has fear around money, who has misunderstandings around money, to give this a thought. There are such a thing as money coaches. Believe it or not, there's a coach for everything. And having had a money coach myself, and essentially be married to one, has shifted so much in my life for the best, and my personal growth, that I would encourage all of you to consider just even having a conversation with a mindset coach with a money coach to see if that is something that might be helpful to you right now in whatever circumstance you're at. Rachelle will have your website attached to the show notes. And then can they find you on Instagram or website?
I am on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Rochelle Sipki as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you next week.